Welcome to Beyond the Thesis with Papa PhD, your weekly inspiration for post-PhD career development. With me, David Mendez.
Hello, and welcome to this special episode of the Beyond the Thesis Papa PhD podcast. My name is Fiona Robinson, and I'm a medical writer and editor, and my area of specialization is inheritable bleeding disorders. And I want to thank David for inviting me to guest host this episode. As we are highlighting the work of a not-for-profit, I am really excited to welcome today the Chief Executive Officer of the Canadian Hemophilia Society, Sarah Ford. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you very much for having me join you for this great episode, and I'm really excited to have a conversation about what we do as an organization and where we're going.
Super. Well, let's dive right in then. So what, or maybe I should ask, who are the Canadian Hemophilia Society?
We're a national organization that supports patients and families and caregivers of those living with an inherited bleeding disorder across the country. And our mission is to improve the quality of life of those living with an inherited bleeding disorder.
Right. Okay. So I know that the Canadian Hemophilia Society they're well established. You've got an excellent reputation. I know personally I use your resources all the time in my own work. And I know you're well known in the inherited bleeding disorders community and also in patient advocacy and not-for-profits. I understand, though, that you are in the process of rebranding and changing your name. Can you tell us about that?
It's a very exciting time for our community. It's a period of change that we are really navigating through right now. So we've officially announced that we will be changing our name later on this year. We're looking to do this at our upcoming annual general meeting. But right now, for us, it's sort of the culmination of a lot of the work that we were doing through our strategic planning period. And for us, this is an output, a result from a lot of the feedback and consultation from our community members. Canadian Hemophilia Society has been working in Canada since the 1950s. We are a proud member of the World Federation of Hemophilia. We have 10 wonderful chapters across the country that are our members. But Bleeding Disorders Canada, which is our new name, really for us represents the next phase, the next stage for our organization and our community going forward in Canada.
Does that mean a new vision and a new mission for the organization?
Same mission, same vision. And actually, it's our name that is actually going to be catching up with our existing mission and our name. Bleeding Disorders Canada really is representing all inherited bleeding disorders. We serve the community members who live with hemophilia A, hemophilia B, von Willebrand disease, refractory deficiencies, and inherited platelet disorders. So Bleeding Disorders Canada actually now matches our vision, which has been the case since the CHS was first founded, but it also matches our mission, which has been in place for many decades.
So a new name is a big change, especially for an organization that is so well established and well known. Were there any reservations or concerns about this?
I think, really the first thing that we really wanted to do was listen to our community. This had to come from our community members, and it really needed to be part of an exploration of where we are, where we want to go, and where we want to be, and how we can serve the Canadians who are part of our community for the next 70 years and beyond. We did a full strategic planning process that really took a look at all of our strategic priorities, and one of our priorities was addressing how do we include everyone who is part of our mission as part of our identity. And so for us, Bleeding Disorders Canada is a change, but it's a welcome change by many community members. And I think at the end of the day, for us, because it's the same mission, we really are going to just keep on expanding the services and the education programming that we offer. We'll continue our advocacy. We're going straight ahead. But this new name is now actually better reflecting who we are.
Well, maybe a quick logistics question then. I guess if you're changing your name, you're probably also changing your website, maybe your email addresses. So let's say I've got one of your awesome educational resources bookmarked on my browser, which maybe I do. Or if I'm reaching out to an email contact, somebody I've been in touch with in the past, is that still going to work? Is there kind of a plan in place to take care of that on the kind of just the mechanistic side?
Definitely. There's definitely going to be a transition period. We're looking to do the official changeover of our URL and of anything that includes our name as either a digital reference or a social media platform. That'll happen later in June. But there will be a transition period. And also, really, frankly, there is going to have to be a continuation of reiterating and educating as to why we're going to be moving forward with this change, because it's not just our community members, but it's decision makers across the country, other member groups that are within the patient community. So this is an ongoing process, but we will make this as easy as possible for anyone who utilizes our materials. And also, there'll be references to our legacy and our history as part of Canadian Hemophilia Society through many of the different programming. So it's going to be an ongoing process. But yes, the idea is to make sure it's as easy as possible for people to continue to access our materials and resources.
So it's really an evolution. It's not the end of one thing and the beginning of another.
That's right.
It's more of a kind of a metamorphosis.
That's very exciting, but it is exactly that. And I think my hope is that, for those that are concerned, and that's a legitimate concern about the legacy and history, that's actually also part of our strategic plan, is honoring our history. The Canadian Hemophilia Society and the hemophilia community has been gone through incredible tragedy and through incredible advocacy to protect the Canadian national hemovigilance systems and surveillance, supporting other patient groups that are also part of this space. It is something that we will continue to do. It's just a core part of who we are as an organization. But honoring that history, I think, is probably one of the most important things that we can do during this transition. So for us, we're working on some major projects that I will be, communicating on further later on this year, but really digging into what has built this community, who are the voices that should continue to be heard, what is our presence in terms of key decisions for national hemovigilance, monitoring, and we will continue to have that role and partnership with the healthcare community to make sure that everything that we're putting out comes from a very reviewed and solid background, and part of our everything that we do really has that at its heart.
Right. It sounds like it's really a very thoughtful organization, putting a lot of thought into all of its initiatives. And maybe that brings me to another question, which was just to ask about, how did you come to this new name? Like, what was the process? Who was involved? It sounds like you have a lot of stakeholders who are really invested in the Canadian Hemophilia Society. So how did they all come together to reach Bleeding Disorders Canada?
I think for a lot of organizations, I'll speak to Canada because every country has a different experience. There's history behind name, and a lot of patient advocacy organizations came to being around the same time as the Canadian Hemophilia Society. And our name, the Canadian Hemophilia Society, reflects that time and that need to make sure that there is a community formed under one identity. Bleeding Disorders Canada, we want anyone who even remotely thinks that they have an inherited bleeding disorder to think of us instantly and to be able to view us as a first go-to place in terms of resource connection community. We could have gone with many different variations, but this was the one that resonated with the most number of people. And we want to make sure that we are clean and clear in our communication as to who we are and what we do. And we want to make sure that our identity continues to be a recognized part of our space for many years to come.
So I know that the CHS has long prided itself in producing and disseminating all of its resources and publications in both of Canada's official languages, English and French. So I have to ask, what is the name of the organization in French?
Well, we're very proud to announce that it is Troubles de la Coagulation Canada. And for each of the chapters, this will be part of their own name change review process. So at the end of the day, Bleeding Disorders Canada, Troubles de la Coagulation Canada, each of the provincial identities will be part of their review process over the next year. But our hope is that we really have a name that resonates both in English and in French to our whole community.
So Bleeding Disorders Canada, Troubles de la Coagulation Canada. It's really a name to reflect the national identity, the goal of representing all the people across this vast country who may have an inherited bleeding disorder. And I know you mentioned an important part of that national identity is the provincial chapters. Mm-hmm. So will all of the provincial chapters also change their name? And does the national organization have any ways that they can support them in that process?
We're a federated model, and that means that each of the provincial chapters, they have their own board of directors, they have their own autonomous bylaw and policies, but they're part of our organization as our members. So we will support each of the provincial chapters that are active currently to be able to go forward with their own evaluation, reflection, decisions which has to do with their own name changes. Our commitment as a national organization is to provide as much support as we can. We have been communicating with the chapters continuously throughout this process. They were part of the consultations. They're part of these discussions. So as each of them come online, if they make the decision to change their provincial name to reflect this new name change, we will be there to support.
So it's an important step in representing and reflecting the needs of people with von Willebrand disease, rare factor deficiencies, platelet dysfunctions, women and girls with bleeding disorders, and also people without a diagnosis. Are there also plans to introduce new or expanded programs or initiatives to meet the needs of these groups?
Well, my personal philosophy, and it's something that I talk to my friends about, is we need to meet people with where they're at. And, a lot of the time, searching for information has become more complex with more information available out there in both digital and in community spaces. We want to make sure that anyone who has just received a new diagnosis, who has discovered that potentially they may have identified that they are living with an inherited bleeding disorder, they have a place to go for whatever access point in their medical education they need. Now, we also work quite closely, as mentioned before, with healthcare providers within our community. And so when we're taking a look at this, we're looking at each of our education programs and saying, okay, where are the questions? What do our community members need to know? Where are some of the gaps? Where are some of the needs that we can serve? So we are looking to expand and continue to expand our education programs, focusing on everything from hemophilia gene therapy education to novel therapies for inherited bleeding disorders. We're looking to update and expand our VWD, von Willebrand disease, education program. I think at the end of the day, people would like to make sure that they have concrete, really reliable, verifiable information that they can bring to the conversations with their physicians. And really, we're focused also on helping patients have that shared decision-making conversation with their healthcare provider.
Yeah, that's really been my experience as well, that the not-for-profits are often seen as a source of unbiased, well-researched information in a time now where so much of the information that is available to us is coming from a very particular point of view. And so I think it's a really important point to raise, that the not-for-profits, the patient organizations, they provide something that is not always available otherwise, or not as easily available as people need. And you've really pointed out that there's a lot of unmet needs, a lot of opportunities to have a really big impact there for these other bleeding disorders. And the treatment landscape for hemophilia, as you mentioned, it's evolved over decades, and that's really accelerated in recent years, some really exciting developments. Does that mean that the need for advocacy and support for hemophilia has decreased?
Oh, absolutely not. I would say actually it's the opposite. We need to keep advancing and implying the right amount of advocacy to protect the care systems that are treating those living with hemophilia A and B. We also need to take the lessons learned from advocating for those patient populations to apply to other underserved populations. This is not an area of reduction. This is actually an area of expansion. So as we are, navigating advancements in treatments and novel therapies, it's an incredible time to be able to see how quickly these things are changing. But there's also a wide gap in treatments available for those other inherited bleeding disorders. Then you also have the care systems. So you need to make sure, and we need to make sure as an organization, that we're continuing to demonstrate that the need to protect the healthcare systems and the really world-renowned multidisciplinary care approach is protected for years to come, because that's going to serve future generations of patients who are living with hemophilia A and B and the other inherited bleeding disorders. I look at this also as an opportunity for us to have a new generation of advocates coming forward, and in a way of engaging people that may not have been part of the community. There's space for everyone to come together, to learn from those that have come before, and to help generate that new generation of advocates and patient volunteers.
It's really an integrated approach to building on the foundation and the legacy of the work that's come before, but then also looking forward to new opportunities, both in hemophilia and in the other areas for the other bleeding disorders. It's really exciting.
I really think that the key to all this is to recognize everyone's lived experiences within the community and recognize that it is a different situation for each patient, but also a different history for each of the conditions that we support. And I know we have very clear intentions to honor the legacy and the history of those that have come before within our community, and also to really keep advancing care and treatment for those that are going to be coming along the line.
You mentioned earlier something about hemovigilance. It's an interesting area, and it's maybe a term that not all of our listeners are familiar with. So can you maybe explain a little more about what hemovigilance is and why that's something that it's important for a patient organization to be involved in?
Many Canadians at the time were aware of the tainted blood tragedy and the outcomes from and the findings and the recommendations that came from the Crever report. But when time passes on, these questions become part of maybe a more faded history. And our role is to ensure that those recommendations, anything that was coming out of that horrible tragedy within the community, is not forgotten, and also is ensuring that we play that watchdog role and to continue surveillance and to continue protecting healthcare systems that not just affect our community members, but potentially many other Canadians out there that are using products or donations. Now, with regards to national hemovigilance, we need to make sure that we do not repeat what happened. And we also need to make sure the systems are in place to avoid potentially other challenges that could arise. So part of the work that we do is ensuring that we have a voice at the table with decision makers, both at a government level, but also in terms of our national authorities that are in this community. And our role is to continue that advocacy and to make sure that the recommendations are followed, or at least are having decision makers aware of what came out of that. It is an important role that I think that our community will continue to do for decades to come, and it is our responsibility as this generation of advocates to make sure that that's not forgotten.
Yeah, it's really the case that I think the patient organizations are uniquely positioned to really center uniquely and only the needs and the priorities of the people receiving the treatments, and that the history shows us that was an essential role, at the time of the understanding of the contamination of the blood supply or the blood products, and so it's really important to have that same role, or to continue to have that presence within the system to make sure that's never forgotten, that mistakes are not repeated, and like you say, it's important for so much more than people with hemophilia. They have the legacy, they have the experience, and to build on that and to use that as an advantage to go forward.
Everyone affected by the tainted blood tragedy has a different story, but the common thread that's running through that is that their stories cannot be forgotten, and the mistakes that are made cannot happen again. And I am very honored to be part of this generation of this community's advocates that will continue that monitoring, that surveillance, that participation in these conversations that need to be had. And we will continue to do so.
So lots of really exciting work going on at the Canadian Hemophilia Society. Sarah, how can we follow? How can we keep up with what you're doing? How can we learn more?
Sure. Well, first off, we have a wonderful site, hemophilia.ca, where you can access all of our educational resources, learn more about our programs. You can follow us on almost every digital social media platform. So we encourage that. really, at the end of the day, the biggest, most important part of the work that we're doing is making sure that there's awareness raising. If you know anyone in your life that could benefit from learning a little bit more, if you've heard anyone talking about expressing interest in this area, please direct them to our resources. Reach out to us. We're here to help. We have a lot of areas that we require great support behind: our research program, our education program. We really want to make sure that at the end of the day, we can continue this work for many years to come. So please, hemophilia.ca, it will make sure that it will connect to the new Bleeding Disorders Canada website eventually when that change happens. And we want to hear from community members. So please contact us.
And if people want to either volunteer perhaps or make a donation, is that also all available through the website?
Definitely. And also all the links to the provincial chapters are there, along with information for each of the bleeding disorders treatment centers across the country. So that's important to note, is that this website acts sort of as a hub, connecting you to both provincial services and also some of our national programs. And for any additional support, we would greatly appreciate it. Everything that we do really is for the community, by the community, with the community. So any support would be wonderful.
Super. That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Sarah. Really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us today about the Canadian Hemophilia Society, soon to be Bleeding Disorders Canada. It's so exciting to see such a well-established organization that is reflecting changing realities and being proactive about truly representing the full diversity of a community. I mean, we see that you're doing a lot of continuing work with your founding core, whether it's forward-looking projects or legacy projects, and at the same time also broadening scope and evolving and innovating. So it's been really wonderful to hear about all of that. And we'll look forward to the official launch of the new name in June. And we will continue to follow all of your great work.
Thank you very much. And thank you for having me.
Beyond the Thesis with Papa PhD is produced by me, David Mendez. If you enjoy the show and want more of my work, please support the show on Patreon. Just go to patreon.com/Papa PhD and choose a tier. And if you just want to buy me a coffee, you can easily do it at buymeacoffee.com/Papa PhD. I'm David Mendez. See you soon.